Hey friends, before we get started, whether you're new here or you're a regular, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a thing. We're on our journey to 25,000, and with your help, we'll get there in no time. Thanks for all that you do. Now, on with the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Sometimes, the scariest moments don't happen in the woods or when we go looking for the paranormal. They happen right where you live, where you work, where things are supposed to make sense. A routine shift that turns unexplainable. A knock in the middle of the night that no one heard but you. A presence you didn't invite, but one that doesn't care and that won't leave. Tonight's stories are about the things that slip into our everyday lives. The moments that weren't in the job description, and the things you can't unsee once you've found them. So, let's get started, shall we? I used to work security at a local museum, small town, nonprofit, housed in a 3-story brick building that used to be a courthouse back in the 1800s. During the day, it was all school field trips and local history buffs. At night, just me, the cameras, and a checklist. It was an easy gig, mostly. Walk the floors every hour, make sure no doors are propped, no displays have fallen over, that kind of thing. Lights off in most areas, just emergency lighting, and the green glow of exit signs guiding your way. The place was quiet, which was nice, until it wasn't. It started with the exhibit room on the 2nd floor, the one with all the old portraits, paintings of city founders, judges, Civil War generals. It always felt a little colder in there, even in the summer. I had actually noticed it on my very first shift, but I figured it was just the AC vent placement or something like that. But eventually I started hearing footsteps. Soft ones. Not heel to toe, not heavy. It was movement, like someone pacing. Always in that room, always just before I reached it on my rounds. I'd enter expecting to find a coworker, a late staff member, a break-in. But it was always empty. The footsteps would stop the moment I crossed the threshold, and I swear, some nights, the paintings just weren't the same. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but I'd walk in, feel like someone had just moved, like one of the painted figures had turned slightly, eyes in a different direction, head tilted just so. One night I thought one of the frames looked crooked. I came back an hour later and it was perfectly level. Then came the incident with the camera feed. I was in the control room watching the live security cams. Standard stuff. When the feed for exhibit room 2 cut to static, just for a second, and then it snapped back on, and the room looked the same as always. Still, dimly lit. No movement, except there was a man standing in the far corner, facing the wall. I sat straight up. I flipped to the hallway cam outside the door. No one had gone in or out for hours. When I switched back, the figure was gone. I went up there immediately, flashlight in hand. I searched the whole room, checked every closet, every emergency door. Nothing. No one. Just the paintings and the cold. The next night, I asked the morning shift guy if the museum had ever reported odd behavior on the cameras. That room used to be the judge's chambers, he said. supposedly where they held the last rites for people sentenced to hang. Could explain the weird vibes. He said it like a joke, but it stuck with me. The last straw was about a week after that. I was doing my rounds heading toward the exhibit room when I saw something through the glass window of the door. A man. He was standing right in front of the portraits, motionless, like he was examining one of them up close. I couldn't make out any of his features, just the shape of him, still, staring. I opened the door. The room was empty. It was just me and the paintings, and a sudden burst of icy air, like someone had stepped past me on the way out. I did end up putting in my 2 weeks shortly after. I still drive by the museum sometimes, but I've never gone back in. Some places just hold on to the past a little too tightly. Last year, I took a temp job doing data entry for a logistics company downtown. It wasn't glamorous. Gray cubicles, bad coffee, flickering fluorescent lights. But it did pay well, especially if you picked up night shifts. Most people avoided them, but I didn't mind the quiet. The office was mostly empty after 9 p.m. Just me, a security guard I never saw, and a janitor who listened to old country music through a single earbud. I really did like it at first. Peaceful. No one stopping by your desk, no meetings, no small talk, just spreadsheets and the soft hum of the vending machines. The first odd thing I noticed was the computer. It always took forever to boot up, but not just slow, uneven, like the screen flickered a little too long, or some old window would flash open, vanish, right before the login screen came up. Just a blink, like someone had been using it and forgot to close something. Then one night, I logged in and a single message was waiting in the internal chat system. We used it for things like IT tickets or shift notes, but this one didn't make sense. Lights off tonight? ? That's all it said. No timestamp or name. I assumed it was from the janitor, maybe about the overheads. I didn't answer, I just kept working. A few nights later, another message. Lights off, please? ? And this one made me pause. I don't know why. Maybe it was the please. I checked the directory. Nothing. I checked the chat logs. Blank. It was like it had vanished. But it was there. I even asked the overnight IT guy if there were server issues. He shrugged and said, "If you're seeing old files pop up, it's probably just ghost data. Happens sometimes when they don't scrub user profiles right." But I was using a brand new login. My credentials had just been issued. And perhaps more importantly, my machine was new. One night around 2 a.m., I caught movement on the edge of my screen. Just a flicker in the reflection, like someone was passing behind me. I turned around quickly, but it was an empty row. All the chairs were tucked in, monitors dark. The janitor's music was still faintly playing from somewhere down the hall. I told myself it was nothing. Lack of sleep or eye strain, probably. But the very next night, I sat down and I found a photo on my keyboard. Black and white, grainy. Looked like a still from a security camera. My cubicle from behind. In the photo, I was sitting at my desk, alone. Except I wasn't. There was a blur in the background, just behind the glass divider. Human-shaped, but wrong. No details. Just a smudge of something that shouldn't have been there. I didn't tell anyone. I packed up my things and left the building before my shift was over. I sent an email the next morning saying I wouldn't be returning. Even still, I don't know what's creepier, the figure from the photo, or the fact that the photo was on my keyboard. This happened about 4 years ago, and even now I'm not really sure how to talk about it. Some people hear this story and think it's about trauma. Some think that it's about the supernatural. I'm not really sure which camp I fall into anymore. I used to hike a lot. It was kind of my therapy. Just me, my boots, and a stretch of trail to get lost in. There's this spot about an hour outside of Eugene, Oregon. Not a national park, just a sprawl of untamed woodland, dotted with old game trails and forgotten logging roads. I liked it because I could go all day and not see another person. One morning in late summer, I headed out a little later than usual. I wasn't trying to summit or make great time. I just wanted some peace and quiet. About 2 hours in, I veered off the trail to follow what looked like a faint path through the undergrowth. I do that sometimes just to see where it leads. And that's when I smelled it. It hit me all at once. This incredibly sweet smell. Sickly sweet. Like overripe fruit rotting in the sun. At first I thought maybe it was a dead animal. Something small. But it was strong. Overpowering even. And for reasons I still don't really understand, I followed it. It's like I couldn't walk away. I pushed aside some brush and nearly stepped into the clearing before I saw him. A man, or at least what was left of one. He was slumped against the base of a tree, legs stretched out in front of him, arms slack at his sides. He was decaying, swollen, skin greenish black and mottled. Parts of him collapsed in on themselves. His face was sunken and bloated, skin taut like it might split. I won't describe more than that. You get the idea. It was the kind of sight that rearranges your insides. I backed up, heart hammering, trying to make sense of it. I scrambled for my phone, got just enough signal to call the local sheriff's office. I gave them my GPS coordinates. They told me to wait, stay put until someone arrived. So I did. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like sitting in a dense forest in near silence, next to a decomposing corpse while the sun starts to go down. The longer I sat, the worse it got. The smell clung to the back of my throat. I started hearing things, branches cracking, the buzz of flies, the occasional snap of movement just beyond view. I tried not to look at him, but my eyes kept drifting back. He didn't seem real. He looked like a prop from a horror film. Eventually, I started to talk. I didn't even realize I was doing it at first, just mumbling under my breath. I told him I was sorry, that I didn't mean to find him, that help was coming, that he wasn't alone. When the deputies finally arrived nearly 2 hours later, I could have cried. One of them stayed with me while the others called in for backup and began the grim task of bagging the body. I gave a statement. They took down my info and I left. No one followed up beyond a quick confirmation a week later. It had been a suicide. The man had hiked out there alone, left a note in his backpack, and overdosed. Peaceful, they said. A choice. But something about it didn't feel very peaceful to me. That night, I had the first dream. I was standing in the woods again, only it was dusk. and I couldn't find the trail. Everything felt warped, like the trees were breathing and moving. The smell was there again, that same syrupy rot. And then I saw him, not the bloated corpse, but a man, lean, tired, dressed in dark clothes. His eyes were sunken. His skin looked waxy, and he spoke to me like he knew me. "You weren't supposed to find me," he said. "You ruined it." I woke up drenched in sweat. The dream came back the next night, and the night after that, and after that. In some versions, he stands at the edge of the clearing, watching. In others, he's closer, angry, accusing. He tells me that I ripped the silence open, that I dragged him back into the world. Once, I dreamt that I was back in the clearing, but this time, I was the one slumped at the base of the tree, and he was standing over me. I started sleeping with the lights on for a while and stopped hiking completely. My appetite vanished. I lost 10 pounds in less than a month. My therapist said that it was trauma, that the human brain reacts strangely to exposure to death, and that dreams are how we process what we can't understand. Maybe she's right. But I can't shake the feeling that I saw something I wasn't meant to see, or that I really messed something up, interrupted something sacred. I didn't even mean to, and I don't mean that in a religious way. I guess I just mean in the way that grief and death and solitude can be sacred. The dreams still come sometimes, not every night, but when they do, I know it's him, even before I see him. He doesn't always speak. Sometimes he just stares. I spent 2 summers working at an antique shop in Gettysburg. It was an old brick building just off the main drag. It kinda creaked even when nobody was moving. The town thrives off of its ghost stories, especially during tourist season, and our shop was no exception. We had more than a few customers come in just to feel the energy, especially in the back corner, where the floorboards always seemed colder than the rest of the place. That's what people said. By my second summer, the owners had decided to close up and relocate. Business was better online, and the new space didn't come with the maintenance issues or the rumors. It was my last week there, and one of the owners asked if I could come in on a Monday to help pack. The store was already mostly empty, shelves stripped, lights dim. There was something kind of eerie about seeing it that way, like the soul of the place had already moved. We were boxing up the last of the smaller stuff when he asked if I could grab an old framed photo from the basement. I hesitated. That basement had always creeped me out. It wasn't finished, just exposed stone, a dirt floor and parts, and piles of old furniture, mannequins, dusty mirrors stacked. Basically the set of a horror film. There was also a child-sized wicker coffin in the corner, which the owner once casually mentioned had been used for Victorian-era viewings. Supposedly, it had belonged to a local family that had donated a bunch of their heirlooms. I didn't want to seem like a wimp, so I nodded and made my way toward the basement. As I got closer to the basement door, I felt this pressure, change in the air, like a moment before a thunderclap. I put my hand on the doorknob and paused, and that's when I heard 2 distinct thumps echo up the stairwell, like someone was stepping heavily on the bottom step. I froze. It was probably something shifting, boxes settling, the building being old. That's what I told myself. But as I reached for the railing to start down, I heard something else, running. This was no casual footsteps, no creaking floorboards. This was fast, pounding, heavy footfalls, like someone sprinting up the stairs, straight towards me. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned and ran. My legs were barely working. I didn't stop until I hit the front of the store, where the owner was taping a box shut. I was out of breath, borderline panicking, and when I told him what had just happened, he didn't even flinch. Just kind of smirked and said, "Oh yeah, that happens sometimes. They didn't tell you about that basement when you started?" And that was it. No explanation, no warning, just, "That happens sometimes." I never went back down there. Never got that frame that day. When they officially closed the shop a few days later, I didn't stick around to see what they packed last. Gettysburg is full of ghosts, sure, but the basement? That one felt personal. Anyone willing, I'd like some advice or thoughts on what I should do about this. It's a touchy story. I'd rather not involve family or friends with it. When your best friend has a kid and they make you their godmother, you never think of fulfilling the caretaker role if the parents happen to pass away. Well, that was the duty for me and my husband, Calvin. We were tasked in upholding that responsibility at the beginning of February. We don't have children of our own, and our new addition was unexpected to say the least. Her name's Hannah. She's 6 months old. Her mom and dad, our best friends, were hit by a drunk driver leaving a comedy show. It was their first night out since Hannah was born. Tiffany and Ron. I was Tiffany's emergency contact. She and I had been best friends since before high school. Tiffany was practically my sister. She lived with my family our senior year because her home life was hard. We were babysitting Hannah the night of the accident. Since obtaining guardianship, it's been a financial strain, but not enough to sink us underwater. I guess it's enabled us to really think about how we budget our money now, and that's never a bad thing. Dare I say, Hannah's being here has forced Calvin and I to strive to become better individuals so that we can teach her the right things as she grows up, and in turn, maybe growing ourselves? No, I'm just kidding, of course. With her being only 6 months old, she's oblivious to the tragedy bestowed upon her. I don't know when's a good age to bring something like that up. It was hard to watch her look for them for the first couple of weeks, but gradually, she's warmed up to us, and I just pray that her brain isn't able to register what happened. It's a priority of mine for her to know how much her mommy and daddy loved her before God took them home. Ron, Hannah's dad, his family took care of the funeral expenses, but were understandably too old to take care of Hannah. The funeral was just that side of the family, us and Hannah. They were buried side by side, and it started to drizzle near the end of the service. We kept Hannah in her car seat and set her at our side while we stood by their caskets. As we tearfully listened to the priest, Hannah started laughing and yip-yapping in her seat. I bent over to check on her and shush her, but she looked so happy. She was clapping and reaching out, moving her head to the left and right of her car seat, like she was watching invisible butterflies. Her burst of excitement gave everyone the giggles because she just wouldn't stop. I think the priest was the only one not laughing every time Hannah would do a roller coaster pose with her arms while making her little baby squeaks. Ron's grandmother said something like, "They're with us right now." It gave me the chills when she made that comment. Looking back at Hannah with that perspective in mind, yeah, it did look like something was actively working to get her attention, something only she could see. The next day, the thought of Tiff and Ron saying their last goodbyes to their daughter really hurt my heart. I vowed out loud to them that I'd take Hannah by to visit once a week. I crossed my heart, and that very next Sunday, me and my goddaughter got dressed in our Sunday best. This time, I put Hannah in a stroller because the graveyard's located less than a mile from the house. It gave me a chance to try my hand at being a certified stroller operator. By the time we got to the gates of the graveyard, I was practically a stroller pro. I could get the thing up curbs, hairpin turns, and through gravelly areas, no problem. Getting to the graveyard was not the trouble I thought it would be. It actually gave me more faith in doing it weekly. It was in the graveyard I started to rethink it, because this time, for some reason, Hannah was not having a good time. I wasn't expecting her to put on an adorable baby show every time we went there, but when I say polar opposite reaction, I mean night and day. This time, as we got close to Tiff and Ron's grave, Hannah started to get visibly scared, crying, with her hands bunched up close, squirming, pushing her body as far back as she could get, like a snake was snapping at her. When we got to the tombstones, I pulled her out of the stroller to try to console and check to see if she was okay. She was going on enough that I started to think a bee had gotten her, or that she was laying on a toy. Pulling her out of the stroller only made her freak out more. She was desperately trying to crawl out of my hands to get away. She became so out of control, I almost dropped her. Feeling myself lose hold, I put her back in the stroller bed, and I apologized to her mom and dad, promising that she's taken care of, that she doesn't act like that. Her distressing behavior almost sent me into a full panic attack. My heartbeat was thumping in my ears, and my nose got really sweaty. Then the handles of the stroller started to shake in my hands. I didn't know if I'd done it unconsciously or if an outside force had nudged it, but I could hear the hard wheels click on the ground after it was lifted off balance. It would have tipped over if I hadn't grabbed it so firmly. I couldn't escape the uncomfortable feeling that lingered in the graveyard. I had to take us out of there. As we left, it felt like I'd stepped out from a heavier gravity. Hannah also stopped fussing the moment we left, like complete silence the whole way back. When we did get home, I reached in to pull Hannah out of the stroller, and there was a rose lying on her chest. Maybe this sounds nice, but the stem was filled with the sharpest thorns I'd ever seen on a plant. They'd gotten stuck in her blanket. I had to work carefully to take it out without poking myself. During our walk home, I checked on her multiple times. Visual contact. The rose wasn't there until we got home. Not wanting to bring the creepy flower inside, I left it in the front yard, but I should have known that Calvin would grab it. When he came home that evening, the first thing he said was, "Honey, look what I found." Making a grand entrance, he has the rose in his mouth like a flamingo dancer. When I see him smiling with it between his teeth, I know he was trying to be romantic, but I screamed, "No, Calvin, get that out of your mouth." He pulls it from his bite real quick, asking, What? And when I start to tell him why the rose is a no-no, his bottom lip begins pouring blood down his chin. He had a razor-thin cut from the thorn on the stem. It had to have been a deep cut, though, because it had bled consistently and was hard for Calvin to clot. When he was done clearing the blood out of his mouth, he told me that the rose was perfectly fine, that he'd picked it up. There were no thorns. He wasn't sure how that happened, and neither was I. It's been over a month since our visit to the graveyard. Every day I feel a little more guilty for not bringing Hannah by to visit. But, and I don't want to say this out loud to other people, but there's something bad at that graveyard. Maybe not Tiffany and Ron's plot, but maybe it's a specific spirit that's hanging around there. I don't know. I don't know what to do about my godmother obligations, taking Hannah to visit. What would you do here? Can't really ask my friends because how morbid and insensitive does this all sound? I'm asking for reals. Is this insensitive? Am I protecting Hannah or acting like a chicken? Weigh in on this because I might take an extreme alternative route. Take Hannah to a completely different graveyard in a different part of town and point to 2 different graves and say, yep, there's your mom and dad. Good old George and Linda. I'm not even trying to make morbid jokes. Just genuinely curious. What would you do? I was working late one night with my research team. Nothing unusual for us. Deadlines, experiments, broken equipment, take your pick. Around 1 a.m., we realized that we were missing a key piece of gear, one that we'd left in our lab across campus. Someone had to go grab it. And lucky me, I drew the short straw. I threw on my jacket and started the walk across campus. Virginia Tech is beautiful at night. Quiet, still, but I couldn't help but feel uneasy. The lab we use is in Norris Hall. If you know the name, you know why. Norris was the site of one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history. 32 people were murdered that day. 31 of them died in that building, on the same floor as our lab. They've remodeled since then, of course. Fresh paint, new doors, a reworked layout. But if you know, you know. The walls, don't forget. I tried to keep my head down as I unlocked the side door and slipped inside. The hallway lights always hummed, and it was cold. It had that clinical brightness that somehow makes a place feel more empty. Our lab is at the far end of the hall, tucked in the corner. I walked fast. The whole time I had this buzzing in my gut, like I wasn't alone. I told myself it was just nerves, the hour, the history. Get in, grab the equipment, get out. I just turned to leave when the door to the lab swung shut behind me, hard. At first, I figured that it was just the old building playing games, a faulty hinge, air pressure. I jiggled the handle, nothing, locked, dead stuck. That's when the panic started to creep in. Not full-blown, but just enough to set your teeth on edge. I reached for my phone, flipped on the flashlight, and texted the group. Doors jammed. Can someone come back and let me out? Before they could respond, the lights cut out. And I mean all of them. Overhead, emergency, everything. 1 second I was standing in a sterile white lab. The next, total darkness. And that's when I felt a hand, not grabbing me or shoving, just touching. 2 fingers pressed softly against my lips. It's that unmistakable shh gesture. I felt my whole body just lock up. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't scream. I don't even remember thinking. Just that cold pressure against my mouth and the overwhelming sense that I was reliving something. Like someone else had crouched in this very room, in the dark, begging the world to stay quiet. My phone buzzed. Someone from the group had arrived. I scrambled to the door again, and this time it opened without resistance. Just opened. No jam, no lock. It had never been stuck in the first place, it seemed. They found me, white as a sheet, shaking, still clutching the equipment that I'd gone to retrieve. I tried to explain, but how do you put that into words without sounding insane? I really tried to avoid Norris alone after that, especially at night. There's a part of me that still wonders what exactly happened in that moment. If something trapped me there, or if something was trying to protect me. Maybe it was one of the students. Maybe someone who didn't make it out. Maybe someone who still remembers what it was like to hide in the dark, praying for silence. For legal and privacy purposes, I've obviously changed the names here, but this is a personal story of mine, and the only paranormal experience I've had to date. I'm sure the previously stated reasons for my anonymity will be forthright by the end of my story. Until then, my name is Jane, and my dead ex-husband we'll call Flynn. Before he became my dead ex, he was my living spouse who'd swept me off my feet right from the moment we met. I was a new hire at the office that we worked at, and my cubicle was next to his. Flynn was a charmer, and we were dating within the same week of my hiring. A few months later, he proposed, and I was moving the stuff out of my apartment and into his house. Flynn had been at the company longer than me, and though our workspaces were back to back, his paycheck made mine look like funny money. I didn't know this at the time, but I gotta tell ya, I didn't get too upset when I found out. He also got a raise after a year of us working together, and I could quit my job. I'd also be lying if I said that change in lifestyle was easy to get accustomed to. Sadly, it was the carefree life that I didn't want to leave, not Flynn. I'm sure he was having multiple affairs behind my back earlier in our relationship as well. He may have been better at hiding them, whatever it was. The first time I did catch him was in our second year of marriage. That killed the love for me. As much as I wanted to forgive him, as much as I told him I did, I never did in my heart. I tried, but slowly I emotionally drifted from him. In his eyes, practically pushing him into the arms of other women who showed him any kind of attention. He wasn't a man. He was a coward that refused to communicate his feelings with me, too afraid of losing his macho attitude. But I buried my heart and mourned for its death already, so I wasn't sweating it. It's true, money never filled the hole in my chest, but it did fill my closet, and I wouldn't have been able to see as much of the world as I did when I was young if it wasn't for him. And I'm still young. 46 doesn't qualify for senior discounts. I don't know if I'd ever remarry, though. Flynn's mom used to tell me if Flynn's dad died, she'd marry the pool boy. I don't think I could ever be a sugar mama. I'll consider marrying an AI bot before that. I saw a documentary where that seemed to work out for a guy until the servers went down, essentially killing his AI wife. When it rebooted, it was like that 50 First Dates movie. I've moved off track. If you don't mind, I'd like to get back to where I was. Okay, summertime. Flynn and I get back from a wedding out of state. No animals and no kids meant no responsibilities, and sometimes we'd be gone for weeks at a time, depending on our travel destination. That time, we only stayed away for 4 days. Arriving home, we opened the door and were met with the most foul of odors. Like a concert porta potty, mixed with vinegar and cherries for some reason. And for the life of us, we couldn't find what the source could have been. And I'm telling you, we searched that house with a fine-tooth comb looking for it. After opening all the windows, the smell only dissipated so much. The remaining funk had to be masked with Lysol sprays and those things that you put in your car to make it smell good. Lynn bought a bunch of those from a gas station that afternoon, and we hung them all over the house, but nothing really helped. Sometimes you think that it would start to go away, only to be hit with another invisible cloud of super yucky air, more than what the nose had already gotten used to. Going to bed that night, I got up more than once to make sure we'd locked the doors when we'd gotten home. When we laid our heads down, both of us could hear scurrying under the floorboards. Both of us thought an animal had gotten under the house and hoped that that was also where the smell was coming from. I say scurrying around, but it really sounded like bare feet running around beneath us. More of a pitter-patter rather than a scurry, if that makes sense. But the noise coming from the crawl space under us, it was less likely to assume that it was a person making that sound, even though it sure sounded like it. Flynn would call an exterminator the next morning. They were in our driveway, looking under the house for us before noon that day, but they reported no evidence of animals being down there. No nests, no fur, no leftover meals. When Flynn first purchased the house, he and his dad put up grates around the open slots leading under the porch, and to this day, they're still holding up strong. That was all well and good, but we had no resolution to the thumping noise the night before, or the stench inside, or the fact that it was even worse now. We opened up all of the doors and windows again, trying to get the air circulating. Sometime after the exterminators left, I was standing in the kitchen, and I heard Flynn say something in the hallway, and then scream. He runs into the kitchen and says, "I just saw someone walk from the living room into the fireplace and disappear." He thought it was me, even said something to it as it walked by. His hair stood up when he did a double take and realized it wasn't me, and then watched it disappear. It looked like he was going to have a heart attack. I made him sit down. His forehead was dripping sweat and his face was flushed. I didn't think that he was lying about what he saw. I didn't see it, but for the rest of the night, Flynn stayed close to me. The experience terrified him enough to follow me into the bathroom while I peed, just so he wouldn't have to be alone. Macho Flynn never acted like that. Now he was like a cat. Every little noise made him jump, sitting tensed up in the bed until he started snoring next to me, and I felt his body slowly relax. We were watching an episode of some English-dubbed South Korean soap opera that our friend had gotten us into ironically, until the wacky characters and over-the-top story became so captivating, it became unironic, and we binged every episode of every season. At this time, there were probably less than 10 minutes left on the episode we were watching when he passed out. I was going to finish it and then planned on going to sleep afterwards. I was already struggling to stay awake, slowly dozing off, trying to keep my eyes open until the credits. Our TV is next to the door in our bedroom. All of the lights are off in the house. The bedroom door was already a little bit open, but from the corner of my eye, while staring at the TV, I could see the door slowly open. Watching the bright TV in a dark room, my eyes weren't adjusting to the dark enough to see anything, not past the doorframe into the black hallway. And nothing could have made me go check how the door could have done that. Instead, I left the TV on all night, turned the volume up a bit louder, and tried to ignore the feeling that someone was standing in the doorway. To sum up the next few days, 2 big crows fly into the same second-story window, breaking their necks, landing on the patio. The thumping continues, even after Flynn goes under the house himself to check. That drove him the craziest. The smell also persisted. It became easier to ignore until you left the house and came back. Then the smell would smack you across the face, all over again. No amount of laundry or deep cleans of the rooms could lessen its punch. I'll also say that I saw a perfect handprint left in the condensation on the mirror after a shower I had, and it was smaller than my hand, and my hands are smaller than Flynn's. The mirror that we have in the bathroom is a pretty tall, oval-shaped one, and the print was at the very top, pointing upside down. I noticed it when I tilted my head up gargling mouthwash. It was too far up there for me to even wipe off with a towel. I was perplexed at its appearance. I couldn't understand how it got there. Then in the middle of the night, one night, something wakes Flynn up, and he can't get back to sleep. While he's laying awake in bed, he gets an overwhelming feeling, almost like a voice in his head urgently telling him to go check around the house, make sure the doors are locked. In an effort to alleviate the feeling, Flynn gets out of bed with the room still completely dark and walks into the hallway. Before he's able to turn on the light, he steps in a puddle of water with pieces of broken glass in it. It was invisible in the dark, and the soft bottom of his right foot gets sliced open, making him lose balance. He let out just enough of a yelp that it woke me up. I found him unconscious in the hallway. Blood was on the corner of the countertop, and it was coming from Flynn's head and foot. I called paramedics, and within 5 minutes, there's a round of knocks at the door. I rush to let them in, scramble to unlock the deadbolt, swing the door open, and don't see any ambulance lights or paramedics. No one's there. I was still on the phone with the operator, and she told me that they were still on their way to me. I deadbolted the door again before returning to Flynn. All of the lights in the house were on at this point, and when I checked on him, his skin was turning pale blue. I sobbed into the phone, begging the operator to make the ambulance drive faster. She tried to keep me calm, but the scene was too much. It's still too much. I hate that when I see it in my head, it was the worst, most horrible, saddest thing of my life. In my marriage, it was safe to say that Flynn and I didn't love each other anymore, but we were still friends. I would have never wished his death. It all moved too quickly after the EMTs picked him up. I followed them to the hospital, just to have the doctor meet me in the lobby and tell me he was gone. They let me go in to say goodbye, and then I was pushed out of the emergency room. Gathering a deceased loved one's finances and assets to disperse amongst family was a nightmare that took over a year to settle. But right after Flynn's death, I went home, and the smell of the house was there to meet me at the door with open arms. Life as I knew it had changed, and it dulled my senses. I threw the keys on the table, and I laid on the couch, cried my eyes out for hours, thinking about Flynn. There were splotches of blood in the hallway where he had slipped. I exhausted myself trying to clean everything, but I stopped when I saw the glass that he'd stepped on. I picked up one of the larger broken shards. Flynn's blood was still able to be seen in the cracks of the embossed curves. I realized they came from a wine glass set of mine. We rarely use these wine glasses. I know nobody pulled it out to drink water that night. But aside from the blood, there was only water on the ground, like it was filled up with tap water and then dropped on the ground. Impossible to see in the dark hallway. The discovery of the wine glass sent me over the brink of insanity. For a little, I was trying to figure out how it could have gotten there. At some point, I must have fallen asleep torturing my brain with scenarios on the couch, because I woke up in the middle of the night, sitting in the same position. A loud bump pulled me from my dream, but I didn't know where it had come from. The room I'd fallen asleep in was freezing. I walked into the bedroom and couldn't bring myself to get in. I took the blankets and made my bed back out in the living room. The next morning, the back of my arms looked like a cat had clawed them while I was asleep. 10 to 15 scratches on both of my arms that stung the moment I opened my eyes. They were long, thin red lines that ran down to my elbow. I recount this next part acknowledging the groggy state I was in, but when I saw my shadow on the wall cast by the morning sun, there was a second shadow standing next to mine. It looked different than mine, and when I moved my hand, theirs stayed at their side. It stayed next to my shadow on the living room wall until I got off the couch. When I looked up again, it was only mine there. I wish the shadow that joined me that morning resembled Flynn's, but sadly, what I thought I saw scared me to the bone. The silhouette was smaller than mine, and I could see that it had long, hanging hair. Something else caught my eye that morning as well, but this time, what I saw was real. In our living room fireplace, There was a woman's running shoe, one that I'd never seen before. Red with white trim. I think it was Adidas. Something that I'd never wear. And the anger bubbled up, thinking Flynn got them for another girl. Grief and anger was a mix that I had felt often before. It felt sickening, and I got down to dig in the soot and the charred wood of the fireplace, looking for a second one. We usually kept it pretty clean when we were burning wood in it. Looking down, I could see that there was no second shoe. There were 2 logs I could easily see behind. I looked at the first shoe and held it in my hand. It was covered in thick black soot. But the fireplace itself didn't have any, except one spot on one of the logs. I quickly deduced the running shoe must have come from inside the actual chimney. As much as I didn't want to, I slowly put my head into the fireplace to look up the chute. The smell that had been plaguing the house for days was the strongest the closer I got my head to it. By the time I was under the hole, I couldn't hold my breath long enough to get a good look up. It was a narrow, rectangular gap the size of a Kleenex box. As heart-stricken as I was, I knew that I had to get the phone book and call someone to check out the chimney. I thought maybe an animal had actually crawled in there and died. When the chimney sweep got onto the roof, he nervously called down to me that there was blood all over the bricks of the chimney. I thought even more that he would find an injured raccoon or cat that had fallen, but neither the young chimney sweep nor I could have expected the decomposing body of a woman. Firefighters, ambulances, and police cars all parked in the grass of my yard while the firefighters broke the chimney apart, enough to retrieve the corpse that was lodged in there. Let's say when they checked the woman's ID, we find out her name's Lori. On top of the roof, next to the destroyed chimney, firefighters also find a bag, one that they described as looking like a kill kit, containing zip ties, duct tape, hunting knives, and an unused Kodak disposable camera. The cops tasked with going to my house for 2 days in a row with 2 different dead bodies had more than a few questions for me. I didn't know Lori, and I'd never seen her until she was being pulled from my chimney that day. Flynn, however, knew Lori very well. I felt nothing but sadness and disgust reading through the text that they'd sent back and forth. Flynn recycled the charming words he used to send me, almost word for word. The chain of messages end with Lori telling Flynn, basically, if she can't have him, nobody can. He left her on red, and that was the day before we left for the wedding. I was humiliated, sitting in a little office while these men read the intimate conversations of my deceased husband and the deceased homewrecker. Literally, it would cost me over $2,000 to get my chimney fixed. That's not the worst part about it, though. This whole situation was traumatizing on its own, but to add insult to injury, for a few months, I was suspected of murdering the woman. Police found out that she didn't die of asphyxiation. There were signs that she'd been beaten, that her throat was crushed before she went in. That was the last straw that broke the camel's back of my patience. I screamed at every cop at the precinct that day that accused me. I wasn't held in jail or detained because they knew I was right. As I walked out, they told me not to leave town, that someone would be by to continue the chat. But days went by and no one did. Later, with more DNA evidence coming in after the autopsy, they would find the actual killer. He was already behind bars, serving time for another crime that he committed the night after he killed Lori, telling the investigators outright that he'd offed her because she misled him under false pretenses, telling him that they were going to go rob a random rich person's house. But when they found out we weren't home, she didn't want to break in because the burglary wasn't the real reason she picked the house. So, he punched and strangled her on the roof of our house, bouncing her head off the brick chimney until she stopped living. Then he picked her up and dropped her into the chimney chute. During her decomposition, her body shifted lower, and her shoe must have fallen off, it being just the right size to fall through and land in the fireplace. Any wider, and I may not have known that she was up there for months, until a skeleton fell through the fireplace. I still live in the house to this day. After the body was excavated, things settled down. I try not to think about it too much, because there's too much to think about. Some days are easier than others, but ultimately, I'm glad I got to keep my home. I've painted the living room twice since then, not because it needed it, but because I needed it. I don't know if I believe in ghosts in the traditional sense, but I do believe in things lingering. Grief, betrayal, fear. They haunt you in quieter ways that no priest or medium can banish. You just learn to live with them, like a shadow standing beside your own, silent and still, until one day, it's gone. Maybe it's there, and you just stop looking for it. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night, news stories, Wednesdays and Sundays, so keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. And of course, subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Special thanks to the Darkest Hour channel members, Lori TESDAHL, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, T. COLTDADDY Eagle, Mallory Dominguez, KARI WATKINS, PILAR TREDEN WIXSON, Larry Hill, RIPLEY, JOJO STARCHER, Mary Patrick, Debbie LAFRENIERE, Julie Bourdelais, Jennifer BECK, MARINA LACHNER, Make Hamilton Home, Evan Pratt, Mary Hineline, Katharine Yes.ImtherealKatie Isabelle, Landshark, Danielle Hecht, Veronica Mckiernan, Keziah Pietersen, Amber Baker, Khris Lauzon, Kara Geos, Marvin Allen, Forgotten Ruins TV, Ravenwolf, Carlos, Stacia Gillette, and Nate Black. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons. Tracy S., Mary H., Tanya F., Tamara K., Monica L., Zoe Watt, Shelley B., Donald C., Marion T., Rat Girl, Alicia S., Aaron G., Nikki H., Mr. Revenant, Naz K., Brendan G., Paul T., Nicholas C., Tony P., Lizanne, Arlene F., Adrian, T.F. Parham, Jason G., Lori T., and Bobo Jenkins. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon or becoming a channel member. Check out the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour, YT. Stay spooky.